Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show most likely to cook your dinner and give you a foot rub. Tonight, I'm joined by my second favorite Canadian, Nate Smith.
I won't ask, Christy, but good to be back. Good to be back.
And with us once more, the Verdun of veracity, the arbiter of accuracy, on loan from Truth Wanted. Welcome back, ObjectivelyDan.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me back, Christy. However, I have to report I have never had a meal cooked by or a foot rub by this show. So I will be expecting these things from now on.
Volunteering. I mean, I guess we'll get into it a little bit later. That might be against the rules, but we'll play with it because I'm game. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Okay, well, all right. We need to back it up here because
I'll cook the dinner, but Christy's got dibs on the foot rub, I think.
I don't want either of you touching me in any particular way. But like what's the topic tonight, Christy? Because I think it's a good one. We should probably start with that.
Well, tonight we're actually three white men discussing why helping out with the laundry doesn't make your penis shrink. So go ahead and give us a call, folks, with your thoughts on what a healthy division of labor looks like for you, or whatever's on your mind. Give us a call, 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex, because the show is coming right now.
Cool. Well, we will talk about gender complementarianism, and I will work very, very hard to pronounce that word correctly with all of its syllables and vowels each time. But first, I am super excited to have you back, Dan. You got to tell me what does have you worked up right now? If it's not foot rub and dinner with me, what's got you turned on?
Well, I gotta say, first of all the honorifics you put. What am I? The Veritas of veracity. Whatever you said, that was
veracity.
What does that even
Veritas
mean?
is good, though. I like that.
It's a fortress city in France. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not as fucking cultured as you, Nate, apparently. So
it was like one of the largest battles in the First World War, Dan. Come on.
Yeah, I was born in 1996. The First World War,
where we don't
in
learn
America.
History.
Yeah, that was 100 years ago for me, like from the time of my birth. So I'm just kidding. That's obviously an important event that I'm just.
Well, I thought it was really cool. Okay.
Okay. Let me talk about what's turning me on, Nate. All right, let's get to that. All right. Look, we were talking about this before. I've talked about this show before, but there's a channel on YouTube called All Gas No Brakes. And there was a channel conflict. That channel actually got bought out. The dude got into a bad deal. He runs a new channel now called Channel 5. Like, that's the name of the channel. But both of it, if you should check it out, it's really, really great. It's what I would do with Truth Wanted if I had $1 million. Like, this guy goes to every single freaky, weird event happening on the planet, and at least in America, and just talks to people that are there, just has conversations with them, and he just uploads the best bits, and it is the funniest, most hilarious thing. Highlights for me are the Flat Earth Conference he goes to one time. He recently did the Canadian truck rally stuff that happened. He interviewed some people there. He went to an adult video conference, which was...
I caught a little bit of the AVN episode before we started filming, and it was hilarious.
Let me tell you, the best part is there's a dude going to this conference with his dad. Like, how do you do that? How do you go to an adult video conference with your dad? I don't know. But this man is there, and he talks to him, and it's just great. I just love it. I just love the weird spectrum of humanity and all of its jewels, and it's just great. I love it. It's fantastic. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, so that's All Gas No Brakes and Channel 5
Channel
on
5.
YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Nate, what's got you worked up right now?
Well, mine is a bit, I don't know, maybe out of date because I haven't been on in a couple of months. But there was on a little show that you may have heard of called Drag Race
Mm-hmm.
with a certain RuPaul. Dan,
Mhm.
I'm curious. Have you ever seen an episode of Drag Race?
You know what I have?
Okay.
Reality television shows are not for me, except for Love on the Spectrum. I believe that is the only reality television show that will actually make you a better
Clicks
human
for you.
being after watching it. Maybe RuPaul does too. I haven't seen enough of it, but yeah.
Okay, well, I love the show. And this past season, they had a straight drag queen on for the first
Oh,
time. Yeah,
okay.
this is a straight guy.
Cool.
And so I was watching this with my partner, and my partner's reaction was kind of like they're invading. He shouldn't be invading our space. This is our space. This is for queer people to express themselves. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. I kind of feel like, the part of moving on from this whole sectarian evil gay thing is letting straight guys maybe dress up as a woman if they want to and put on makeup. I don't know. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, it's not like there hasn't been straight people that have done drag before, right? Like
It was a
Sure.
first
Yeah.
for the
Like-
show. Yeah.
first for the show, but it's like that's always been the thing as far as drags existed, right? Like as far as I know, I mean, I'm not an expert on the history of drag, and again, I am a cis straight white guy who is not into the culture at all. So this is just me talking about it. But like, if the whole point, or at least part of the point of the culture, is to be inclusive, to show other sides of people, maybe having some of those people on that are also part of the culture as well be there, because it's not like outside of RuPaul's Drag Race there's not going to be straight drag performers, right? So
Right.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. I can appreciate the idea that like this is sort of a carved out special space, and Jesus Christ, like so much media tailors to straight folks. So
Yeah.
I get that angle. But I mean, they're on what, Nate? Like season 27?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
I feel like nobody is being forcibly pushed out of their community to make space here. I don't know. I'd love to hear some hot takes if we've got it wrong. I can't say that I'm an ongoing fan of the show. So
yeah.
I am. I watch every season, every episode. But I'm a cis man myself. I'm not straight, but I'm cis. So I would be curious if anybody in the audience or any who's maybe thinking about giving us a call. Call in with your take on straight people getting involved in traditionally LGBTQ plus spaces. Yeah.
yeah,
512-991-9242. Give us a call.
Hey, yeah, no, great question. I am interested in those hot takes, but for now, I want to go ahead and jump into it because we've already got a bunch of people in the chat asking the question, what the hell is gender complementarianism?
Mm-hmm.
Dan, why don't you kick us off? I mean, just broadly, how would you define that idea?
It's a great question. Complementarianism is almost a theological. I think it's appropriate to describe it as a theological stance on gender roles, right? So one thing that religion is very good at doing is telling people what to do, and like this is another kind of aspect of that, right? So like I would think like there's how the church would describe it, those who believe in it, and then those who are outside of it. So I think the church would describe it as, well, it's a way of talking about God's intentions for men and women. And he does have separate intentions for men and women, according to them. Specifically, men tend to gravitate towards leadership roles, women gravitating towards, support roles. And of course, men and women being defined as they traditionally have, in that fundamentalist sense. And so like there are these prescriptive interpretations of particular biblical verses, most notably some in First Timothy, and some other places that will talk about like, oh, these are men and women's roles, and like this is how they're supposed to be in order to like function optimally, not just like in society, but also like in the eyes of God. So like that's how they would define complementarianism. How I would define complementarianism, though, Christy, is just the church telling you how to live your fucking life because of what you got in between your legs. Like that's really how they see it, I think. And I don't like it. I've never liked it, even when I was a Christian.
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about this later, but I do want to talk about my story with the book Wild at Heart, which is a very, very popular book on gender complementarianism.
You know what? I'm remembering how we came to this episode. I believe there were some beers involved and a discussion about that book between you and I, because Jesus, if that book isn't a well, it's a problem. It's a problem.
Well, it's not only does it exist as a book, it also now exists as a podcast, and it exists as an ongoing like theological seminary show or something that travels the churches. It's a media empire. It really is. Yeah.
Jeez. Well, yeah, Nate, anything that you might add there, or maybe about the theology and kind of the biblical underpinnings of these ideas? I mean, I don't know what your relationship with Scripture was growing up, but this doesn't feel all that divorced from the quote God of the Bible.
No, it's absolutely intertwined with the God of the Bible and theology. And for me, what this just boils down to is men with power trying to keep it and possibly trying to get out of helping with the dishes, basically, is what it comes down to. I mean, that's sort of a little microcosm of the greater issue, but it's basically white men with power who basically want to keep it and don't really, they want to keep the women in the kitchen. They don't want to have to help with that. It's just men being lazy and awful.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem with it, because it's often describing very modern ideas about how men and women should be functioning. Like they pretend like they're looking at these ancient texts and revealing some sort of ancient wisdom from there. But the truth is, like, if you look at ancient, Jewish societies, and societies, I have to say plural because across the diaspora, it's going to be different, based on the customs, but also like just ancient cultures in general when it comes to treatments between men and women. And it's going to be different. Like it's always has been different. And even in this book and in other places where people talk about this, like it's not consistent. There is an organization called the Council on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood that created a statement. They actually created two statements, a more recent one called the Nashville Statement in 2017, to try to actually like write out specific wording and boundaries on what they mean when they talk about this stuff. And there's churches and other organizations that have kind of signed this document. But like churches will do this. Like they'll have like basically statements on theology that they will sign to signal whether they agree or disagree on this. So there's like some attempts at rigidly defining this, but really, I mean, it's kind of up to, like Nate said, whoever's in charge. Like, yeah, we want to keep that
whatever
power.
feels
like,
convenient.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I suppose asking who believes this horse shit might be a little bit too simple, but it sounds like it's tied to a lot of evangelicalism, a lot of patriarchy. I mean, where do these types of things show up?
Well, let's see. According to the Wikipedia page, we got the Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Southern Baptist Convention, the Presbyterian Church of America, the Evangelical Free Church of America, and a list of like a couple dozen other churches and organizations here. So it's a lot of Christianity, particularly
all signed on to that specific credo.
Well, they're not necessarily signed on to that specific credo, just that that there's written citations of broadly defined
endorsing those ideas,
endorsing these ideas in one way or another. Yeah, because again, it's inconsistent on what exactly these things mean. I mean, churches today can't even figure out whether women can be pastors, right? Like that debate is still happening with a lot of people, and like that disagreement, why they can't figure it out, is because they're going to the Bible to look at these ideas of how gender roles are supposed to be performed. I don't think personally, now I've read the Bible, Nate and Christy. I don't know if you guys have. I don't think it's a very good guide on how people should live their life, let alone what they have to say about human biology and, human roles within society. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. So,
and let's not just single out the Jesus thing either. Muslims are pretty bad at it too. I have a fella come over from a Muslim country that's recently started working with him, and I literally had to show him how to use a broom. And I asked him to clean up, and he's like, I don't do that. That's women's work. I'm like, no, yes, you do. You do now. And I had to show him how a broom works. I'm like, how is the function of this thing not evident to you? It's crazy.
Yeah. And it goes back to Judaism. I mean, like, there's literally rules on if you're menstruating at a camp, like, you can't be like in the camp for several days. You know, like these kinds of rules and specific peculiarities where the law actually doesn't affect men and women equally come from, you know, Judaic texts, which is interesting. See, and obviously not unique to Judaism either. I mean, most cultures are not great towards women. I mean, but European ones, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Other places, actually, in more agrarian societies, there's a lot of talk around in anthropologist circles about how there tends to be more equality within the work between sexes and stuff, which is interesting to see. It seems that as we've developed more of these kind of rigid hierarchies that we tend to find, again, in like European societies, this is where we also find large amounts of sexism, which, hey, who knew? Who knew, guys? This is like, whoa, come on. Crazy.
Who would have thought that the male-dominated culture that steamrolled every indigenous population they came across maybe had some shitty ideas? What an earth-shattering revelation.
It's obviously the liberals that are really ruining this, right? I mean, they're the ones to blame, I think. So
yeah, well, and I think that's
terrible.
As much as you're poking fun, I think that's a important part of this conversation, because so much of the context of why we're hearing about this and why it's become such a rallying cry, I mean, it's very much like a straight pride kind of energy, because there is a lot of pushback against traditional gender roles right now. I mean, we don't want to have a society, I'm broadly speaking, I think, we don't want to have a society that needs to have a Me Too movement every 5 years just to keep caught up with all of the accusations, with all of the sins that need to be atoned for. But as much as I'm hearing you like list off these different organizations and these different cultures spanning back time, in modern day life, how widespread do you think these assumptions are?
Well, I think as a general rule, the more fundamentalist your Christianity, the more likely you are to believe in gender roles, right? So again, I'm just talking about from a Christian perspective, because that is the culture in which I grew up around. It certainly was prevalent in the places where I was at in Central Texas. I think, you know, last stats I saw, about a third of the country still believes in like young earth creationism in some form. And I'm willing to bet that those same people also believe, like broadly speaking, that there's these differences in men and women that are perhaps God ordained. So it's a lot of people, at least in the US, for sure. Right. It's weird how tied together these seemingly like very different ideas are when it comes to looking at the theology of the Bible and what Jesus supposedly taught and what Paul totally taught, and actually how far they will go with some of these prescriptions, because we really are talking about, again, like very different ideas as to how ancient societies and cultures form themselves versus today. Like they literally are just mad whenever a woman like becomes a boss, or like a woman has anything to do with like the decisions that men have to make on
becomes a bother
matters.
It's in the way.
Yeah, like there's not a lot of dudes that are like, oh no, we're fighting to like get into the roles that women have, right? Because like women have not had power in our society for most of its existence. So, and even today, right? So it's very interesting to see people defend these kinds of ideologies, because you really are kind of defending the power. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that women don't endorse these ideas, right?
Right.
There's a lot of people who exist in the church today who are saying, no, these are good. I feel more comfortable in this role that has been prescribed to me. And I guess that's fine if you like it for yourself, but it's one thing to like it for yourself and to say, no, you also have to follow this rule, right? So
yeah, no, I mean, when we first started this show, Megan had a almost weekly segment where she would just read things from Jamie Lawson, the transformed wife, and then get angry about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of oppression here coming from all directions.
I believe the term is internalized misogyny. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
Mhm.
Let's be fancy
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Well,
So go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that honestly, we have spent enough time on this show, like clearly debunking all of these ideas. I don't know how much time we really need to spend on that project because obviously non-binary people exist. Obviously, having a particular phenotype or chromosome pair or genitalia does not define you in every aspect or put restrictions on like what's appropriate for you. And yet, as our understanding of like the science of gender, the biological underpinnings of these things gets more sophisticated, I feel like these voices are getting louder.
Yes.
Yeah, why is it so tempting?
It's tricky to say. I don't know. Again, like we obviously talked about a very obvious reason to me, which is power, right?
Sure.
So like in our society, in American society, like we have these ideas about men and women and what they should be doing, and like men have always in this country been the politicians for the most part. They have always been the bosses of companies, the leaders, quote unquote, right? And that's kind of been the role that has been filled in this space. And in order to keep that up, there has to be some sort of justification for it beyond like biology, right? If biology doesn't become the grounds by which you can base these things off of, then you have to instead go to theology, right? So like obviously there's a lot of people who misunderstand biology, so they're still going to be using those kinds of biological arguments, but you can have a perfect understanding between the differences between men and women or lack thereof from a scientific point of view and still say, well, this is what God said though, like this is how things are supposed to be, and you can kind of point to that, and the language becomes less about what science has to say nowadays and more about spiritual things. So to give an example of this, I want to point this out. This is a statement made by a Baptist organization, the Southern Baptist Convention. Basically, again, these organizations, they just love making these big statements that they can kind of sign on to and say, well, we agree and disagree to this. So I'm going to read this to you just to give you an idea of what they think about complementarianism, specifically in marriage. Okay, so here's the quote. The husband and wife are of equal worth before God, since both are created in God's image. The marriage relationship models the way God relates to his people. A husband is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. He has the God-given responsibility to provide for, to protect, and to lead his family. A wife is to submit herself graciously to the servant relationship of her husband, even as the church willingly submits to the headship of Christ. She, being in the image of God, as is her husband, and thus equal to him, has the God-given responsibility to respect her husband and to serve as his helper in managing the household and nurturing the next generation. In other words, it's separate but equal. Like that's really what they're trying to say, right? Like they really want to emphasize, no, like no, they are equal in this partnership. They're just, they're ontologically different, but they're functionally, ontologically the same because they both come from God, but functionally different, right? And that's the caveat here. That's why people will defend this, because they will say, and even I thought this as growing up as a Christian, like, oh, well, this is still a fair system. We're still both equally loved by God. We just have different roles that we're just better at, and
different responsibilities. The fact that our responsibility is important and your responsibility is not. Let's not get worked up on the details.
Well, they won't even say that. They'll say it's equally important, Christy. They're both equally important, right? One just happens to dictate how you're going to live your life, and the other one is just how you choose to live. And so it's very I don't know. I don't want to say sinister, because I don't know if it's actively malicious. I think a lot of people believe this stuff subconsciously, but it is very sad because people who do believe this are obviously limiting themselves and how they can live their lives. And I do think that's sad.
I mean, honestly, in a completely non-joking way, when you were reading off that quote, I there's some real discomfort. Like anybody
Yeah.
listening who felt a little bit triggered by that, I just want to validate that experience, because I know I spent a lot of time on a hard wooden pew hearing that kind of bullshit day in and day out. You
Yeah.
get away from it, you almost forget how, I don't know, the cadence of it is just very specific in a really disgusting way.
Yeah, it gets in your head. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't help that, like, when we live in a society that seems to validate these ideas, because you look at it and say, like, wow, look at all these men who have been in leadership positions, and look at all these women that have played domestic roles. There must be some truth to it, because look, it's already happened. You can point to the history of it and not realize, oh, well, they're dealing with their own socialized ideas of what they think is right and wrong. And there's also an equal lack of opportunity between both sexes historically. I mean, we're talking about a country that only decided 100 years ago, yeah, I guess women should vote, like,
yeah. Well, and I think it's important to remember that the argument around that was often that the head of the household would vote on her behalf, right? Like be represented in that way, which, Jesus, like that's so easy to normalize and yet so incredibly ridiculous and offensive if you look at it for half a second with clear eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that I should point out that should be obvious, but like this is obviously a very easy recipe to set up for domestic violence and for abuse to occur, right? Because when you have relationships like this, you can justify people's action or inaction to do certain things as, well, this is the man in the house, and we got to listen to them, and that's just the way things are. And like, how many times has that been cited as a defense for people hitting other people, for people saying abuse to other people? Like it's too often too much to list, right?
Yeah, and that's without wanting to make overly much the experience of just day in and day out being constantly reminded that you're less than, that you're less significant or less important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I really want to get into y'all's personal experiences with some of these ideas, and in particular, Dan, I was telling you before the show, I found like a weird number of articles, national news sources that referenced your very small hometown. So we'll get into that in a moment, but for now, Nate, why don't we take a look at who's on the phones?
Let's do that, Christy. We have Jamie waiting for us, calling in from California. Pronouns are they, them. And Jamie, it says here you're looking for some tips on coming out to your family about being non-binary. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, basically, I'm non-binary, and most of my family is very Christian. And so they do believe in, like, what you guys were saying about those gender roles, and this is how a woman does, this is how a man does, and stuff like that. I have some uncles who are gay, but they still sort of believe the same things, so it's kind of weird. But, yeah, I was talking to them, trying to explain, like, how I just don't fit into any of that kind of perception of how a human is. And my uncle was like, well, so your gender, like your expression of that is just so you're trying to tell people how you want to be seen or how you want them to view you. But I mean, you're still female, you're still a woman, even though maybe you like more masculine, traditionally masculine things. Why would you want people to see you as something else? And I didn't know really how to explain, like, I'm not a woman. I'm not woman or man. I just, like, I don't know. I really am having a hard time, like, explaining it to them.
No, I hear you. I mean, explaining is a complicated word, right? Because, to like really dive into gender theory can become a incredibly complex academic pursuit. There's a lot of very fascinating scholarly research on these topics, and there's a lot to be said there. But I don't suspect that misunderstanding is actually the problem here. Like, I don't think it's that the words are too big or the concepts are too complex. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, they're all pretty smart people, so it's just really frustrating that it's almost like they're insistent on not believing me. And like my uncles, for one, they'll like quotation marks go along, but it's almost condescending in a way. I'm just like, just like, I am who I am. Like, just be okay with that. Like, I don't understand why you want me to, like, you can't change, like, you can't just see me as who I say I am. Like, I don't get why that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people. That's part of the reason why gender roles and gender has existed as a construct, right? Because people feel more comfortable putting people into boxes and sorting people out. I mean, that's really what it is. And when you're making an expression and saying, "Hey, I actually don't fit into these boxes, and this is who I am," that can rile people up. And even the most, like, again, liberal, accepting people can have a really hard time with it. Because not everybody's up to date on, like, feminist theory. Like, not everybody's reading fucking Judith Butler while they're, taking a bath or something, right? Like, they still have these ideas that have ingrained in them since birth that people still have to kind of work out. And I'm sorry that you're having to feel like you're explaining yourself to people, because that's never a fun thing to do. I feel weird giving advice in any capacity because I am a cis dude that like hasn't had your experience in quite the same way, JB. But I can say, in regards to feeling like you have to explain yourself, never feel like that you can't exist as you are because another person says, "Oh, you have to be this way." You can at least have the baseline of respect of being who you are because you're choosing that for yourself. And at least the people here will respect you for that, and we'll keep fighting to help other people respect you for that, right?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. It's like with my mom, trying to explain it to her, who is really like not fundamentalist, but like she's got her foot in the door, of that side of Christianity. And I gave her a hypothetical of, well, what if you saw a guy on the street and he was wearing high heels? She's like, well, obviously he's trying to be a woman. I was like, no, maybe he just likes high heels. That doesn't necessarily mean he's trying to be a woman.
Yeah.
High heels when they were created for men, and women during that time would wear them to feel more masculine. She's like, well, obviously he's just trying to be a man. I was like, you can't even accept a hypothetical person's like how they want to be seen. Like, what's wrong with you? Like,
yeah, it's funny too because Jamie, you said that your uncles are like. Yeah, your uncles were like, well, I'm assuming maybe you just like more masculine things. And I'm going to guess here, Jamie, that maybe it's not even that you like them because they're masculine. I think you probably just like those things because you like those things. But like, even then they have to describe liking certain things on that gender binary, that spectrum, right? Which is interesting. But I want to take it to these guys, give their thoughts.
Yeah, well, and arbitrary and culturally bound. Like you pointed out, Jamie, high heels have changed hands. The pink and the baby blue gender colors have swapped in the lifetime of people still around. So it is very silly that people want to cling to these ideas, but you're seeing that firsthand. Because it's not that it's too complicated. It's not that people, quote, don't understand. It's that they're choosing not to. They're holding on to a belief that helps them to organize their lives, and they are willing to do that oftentimes violently and oftentimes at the cost of a loving familial relationship, which is just gross. And I wish I had more to offer you than, God damn, I'm sorry.
No, it's a tough situation. So I do appreciate you guys like hearing me out.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, if I could offer anything, I would say when I was a Christian and when I was bigoted towards queer people, I had this idea that, well, maybe I would like them more if they just weren't so queer all the time. Like that was really my mindset. It was like, maybe if they didn't have the parades, or if they didn't quote unquote shove it in my face, I'd be more okay with it. But I'm actually glad that people did quote unquote shove it in my face, or quote unquote out, or not. I don't know why I said quote unquote that time. Just mean out. Just like are in the public space and are having these conversations, because I needed to have that conversation with myself. I needed to hear the perspectives of queer people in order to understand where they're coming from and realize not only are they not so different from me and that they share the same kinds of human experiences that I do, but also that they are people that deserve to be respected in every way that they come in. They don't have to compromise and come to my view of what I think they should be in society, right? Whether that pertains to your gender or your sexuality or whatever. So I think continuing to be yourself and continuing to respect yourself above all else is one of the best things you can do in terms of changing other people's minds, and being an activist,
I also think it's really
I've actually been working on that in therapy. Being more confident in myself and being okay with, just being me. Like I had some issues with my immediate family where we go to the movies or we see TV or whatever, and maybe gay representation on there, what have you. Yeah. And there was upset and uproar, and sometimes there were walkouts. And one time I was just like, hey, that's hurtful. Like your disgust feels, because I'm part of that community. So your disgust, you're expressing that towards me. And like, I'm not trying to change you, but I would appreciate if you were more respectful to me and at least, keep it to yourself. And they were a little more receptive to that. They're like, you're right. You don't want to hurt your feelings. We're sorry about that. And I was like, yeah.
Good. It's easy to make fun of a character on TV. It's not as easy to make fun of a family member or a friend, right? So it's good that you had that conversation.
Exactly.
Maybe you were going to say something.
Yeah.
Oh, just in my own personal experience coming out to family, something that helped me was running a sort of cost-benefit analysis of, what is the likelihood that this is going to be a productive conversation? Mm-hmm. Am I mentally healthy enough to have this conversation, right? Like, is this going to hurt me? And I think that's something that you need to or should give yourself permission to decide. Like, is this hurting me to the point? Is this beyond the point of being constructive? And I think something that you said earlier about, keep it to yourself, drawing those boundaries, if it's not going to be a constructive conversation, is totally okay. It's not up to you to be the arbiter of non-binary people the world over, right? Like you can take a break.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's all I got, really. I really appreciate you guys talking with me. I feel a lot better, actually. I think moving forward,
glad to hear it.
I can be more comfortable in myself. I don't have to always justify who I am to everyone. No. I'm gonna just be me. It's cool. If you don't like it, whatever. I'm still gonna live my life. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, Jamie, thank you for sharing that story. That was awesome. And hang in there. I hope things get better for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Good luck. Thank you so much for touching base. Mm-hmm.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah,
that's tough.
Well, it's conversations like these that reminded me again why I choose to be an ally. You're right, as someone who is not a part of the queer community in really any sense of the word. I am still trying to actively have conversations with people about this when appropriate, right? When I can. I'm a guy that has an earring right now. I've been thinking a lot about painting my nails, I see Christy doing it, I'm like, damn, maybe I want to do that. And it's like, I would love to do that just to see people's reactions, just so I can have that conversation. Think, well, if this bothers you, why does it? Is it because I don't fit into your expectations of what a person can be, for my gender, for my expression of self, or is it like something else? Where do we get these ideas from? What happens when we talk about this stuff? And that's not a conversation people have every day with themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, you can tell better than any poll which way a particular county will go in the next election if you spend time there with painted fingernails. You'll like just gauging everybody's reactions. You will learn a lot because it goes both directions in a way. Like there is a aggressive, violent, like, that's not for men. Like you shouldn't be doing this. You're just trying to be a woman. Like all those kinds of ideas. And then you do see, honestly, a good number of, I want to believe, well-meaning people that are willing to like fawn over you in a lot of ways. And that can become problematic too. And I think that ties right back to all of these ideas about gender being prescriptive. And then when somebody pushes back against that, that becomes a transgressive act that people then want to rally around. And something like wearing high heels, which really doesn't need to have anything to do with your gender, can become this incredibly fraught issue.
Yep, totally. Or even for me, like I put my pronouns in my bio, and I've had arguments with people over this. They're like, one guy on Twitter told me, well, Dan, nobody's questioning what your gender is. And it's like, well, if you're implying that I have a masculine like facial structure or presence, then I'll take that because that's what I enjoy having. But it's like, but you don't know what my actual identity is unless you really asked me, unless I told you. And it's like, I want to break that down even for a guy who looks like me, who has the features that I have and performs the way that I do, because like I want to bring it to other people who also look like me, who also talk share those similar characteristics, because that's where that change needs to happen, in my opinion. That's where we need to have greater acceptance for queer communities. So
Something we're going to take another call here real quick, so please be patient, caller. But I wanted to ask you, Dan, as somebody who formerly held bigoted beliefs towards the LGBTQ plus community, how did that deconversion look for you? Like, did you lose the faith first and the anti-gay thing later? Like, do you still feel that sometimes? Like, how does that look for you?
I think it was in the process of losing the faith. I remember there's a podcast I'm not sure you guys are familiar with. It's called The Liturgists, and The Liturgist is a podcast. It's very popular amongst progressive Christians because they're not afraid to have conversations about changes that should happen in the church, or where some of these ideas come from and stuff. And I believe it was 2013, 2014, they had an episode about basically gay people in the church, right? And it caused a huge controversy. It's still one of the most listened to episodes, because they actually interviewed gay Christians and asked about their experiences, and they interviewed trans Christians and asked about their experiences. And that was, I kid you not, my first time hearing a trans person talk for more than probably 10 minutes, I'd say. I didn't know any trans people grow up. I didn't know. I knew some gay people, but I didn't. I wasn't really close friends with a lot of them, and I didn't have conversations about their sexuality. So, like, not only hearing them talk about their experiences, but also how they can reconcile that in their faith experiences. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't convinced. I don't think you can really reconcile Christianity with the queer experience in a lot of ways. I know there are people who can, and if they can, I guess you live your life. But I do think it's unfortunately fundamentally harmful for queer people to be in the church. But that's another argument. What I learned from that was, wow, you can be a Christian and you can have these experiences. And I don't know, I came more in touch with a community that I wasn't in touch with at all, basically. And I'd say that was my first exposure to that, and realizing, oh, gay people exist and they're fine. There's nothing to worry about. So it's all good.
I like that answer.
Yeah. So what's next? What do we got?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's take a quick moment and see what's been going on around the rest of the ACA.
Cool.
At the same time, I know for myself, like, I cannot get certain worship songs out of my head. And at 2 a.m., that can be a more perverse torture than any fear I could possibly conjure.
There are numerous verses talking about the inferiority of women compared to men. There's a verse right now I'm looking at. The men are worth 50 shekels of silver, while women are worth only 30. We equally need to look at the way the Bible is interpreted and practiced.
Other medical professionals and health experts, they're the ones who've invested the time, the study into actually getting, wait for it, because this is very important, facts. And I know that's a dirty word to some people.
I don't think you can say that on YouTube. You can go to any local community college, spend a couple bucks, you can take a course on linguistics and learn about how languages have developed. And it has nothing to do with the Tower of Babel, which is it's a fairy tale, my friend.
Okay, thank you guys for your time. You have a very blessed, or let me see, I'm sorry, I gotta watch my language.
You can just say good. Have a good day. You know, don't trigger me, Jeffrey. I'll go off the rails.
I'll get real emotional.
Have a penis, John.
I win. Goodbye.
Well.
How weak and vapid of an argument do you have to just scream I win and hang up? That's kind of rough, yo. That's incredibly reductionist, and it's like saying that a woman is just a thing that can have babies. It's really anti-feminist and pretty gross. So sorry, that's not how anything works, dude.
Team Forest. Hashtag Team Forest.
I win. So end the show.
All right, well, you got another phone call for us?
We do have another phone call, and Noah has been waiting patiently for quite some time. So, Noah, thank you for your patience. Noah's calling in from Texas. Pronouns are she, her, and she is wondering whether or not we think Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned. Ooh, that's a heavy one. Noah, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, yeah, so I had some things I wanted to talk about, first being Roe v. Wade. Do you guys think it's going to be overturned? I've heard like mixed signals from people.
Well, it's up to the supreme dictators of our country that we call the Supreme Court, right? I joke, but like ever since I learned about what the Supreme Court was in AP government in high school, I was like, so they can just kind of do stuff, huh? Like they can just kind of decide a lot of shit. And that's kind of what's happening right now. Now it's interesting because this document was leaked, you know, this draft supporting this change in the law, overturning Roe v. Wade. And so the consequences of that we have not yet seen. I mean, this is really kind of unprecedented in a lot of ways. A lot of people are questioning the institution of the courts and like how we can effectively make laws. And I'm over here saying, why are we talking about the effectiveness of the institution and not talking about how batshit crazy this is for people who can have babies? Like, you know, it's not great. It's not great for anybody involved. And we've yet to see. I don't think anybody can confidently predict one way or another what's going to happen, to be honest with you. Who could?
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert. I won't hazard a guess, but I can definitely say that it seems to be the overwhelming sentiment among a number of commentators. I kind of would hope that if something like this were ever to become a formal ruling, if what we understand from that leaked draft actually did become a interpretation of law, I would like to think that would trigger enough of a response from the people, from the general population, which consistently says in poll after poll after poll that abortion ought to be a codified right.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I've got too much track history in the past few years to really give into that hopefulness.
I thought we figured this shit out when like Freakonomics came out in like 2006 or whatever. It was like, hey, actually, when abortion is legal, like less abortions happen. You know, like I thought that was like common knowledge. I guess it's not.
Hey, Christy kind of stole my answer because I was going to say that Yes, I kind of do think it's going to be overturned, and I also think it's going to be a pivotal moment for the United States when they're like, we need to wake the fuck up. Like, we're losing our democracy here.
Yeah.
So I'm Canadian, so I'm watching this lunacy from the outside in. But yes, I do think it'll probably be overturned, and yes, I think that is going to spur a major change. That's just my opinion, though. What do you think, Noah?
Yeah, and then you got this. Yeah, I'm definitely concerned if it does get overturned, it's going to upset a lot of people. I also think that the gun restrictions right now, they need to be higher with all the mass shootings going on. So
that's a no-brainer
as well. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I keep telling people, like if they want this stuff to stop, they have to implement better background checks and, just ban assault rifles from young kids. It's just ridiculous. It's like
we'll see what the willpower is. We'll see what actually comes of all of this so-called discussion, because it doesn't feel like it's moving in a productive direction. But I guess we can just do what we can do.
Come on, guys. When the founding fathers were writing these documents, they wanted me to have frag grenades and M16s. Like, that was the intention. And I'm not going to let you guys take that away from me.
And an Apache attack helicopter, don't forget.
That too, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, what do you think? How do you think we beat the British? With horses and shit? Fuck that. No, dude.
Oh.
No.
Patriot missiles,
Helicopter.
duh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Handheld rocket launchers, M60 machine guns, like, come on. It's a free. Yeah, that's how it should be. I couldn't agree more, Noah. Again, I'm from Canada, where we actually have sensible firearms legislation, and I am a gun owner myself. And I absolutely do agree that you should have to jump through significant hoops to be able to get a gun. A lot. You should be handling tests, safety tests, liability insurance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I actually shoot guns for fun sometimes, but, I think it should be harder for people to get guns if they're not going to use them responsibly. And what the hell are these people, selling the guns? Selling them to these, young 18 to 20-year-olds. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is concerning to see what is and is not on the national conversation and what is on the agenda. And I want to say that all we can really do is hope, but in reality, there is more that we can do. And that's why we're here on these shows. That's why we're here pushing for separation between church and state and for positive atheism around the world. So I appreciate you being a part of this community and hopefully helping us move the dial, even if personally I'm a little bit prone to nihilism and depression when I turn on the news.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I try to stay news because it's pretty negative. Another thing I wanted to talk about was I just had a debate with Kent Hovind, and it didn't go very well because the audience was very hateful in the chat. Because I put my pronouns were she, her, and they are just calling me male and he and all that stuff. Yeah, it went pretty bad.
What? Yeah. Kent Hovind's fans not being a fan of calling people by their proper pronouns? You're kidding me. What a surprise.
Yeah, I'm surprised that did that.
Yeah. Well, and like we talked about with the last caller, I think it's really important to recognize that this is not about how difficult or confusing it can be. Obviously in a situation like this, it feels a little bit more close to the surface, but I think we need to remember that this is not a challenging idea academically. And we've demonstrated that on this show a number of different times, a number of different ways. So regardless of what it says on, Freakonomics podcast, regardless of what we understand from data science or any of these things, the truth is our government is really wrapped around the finger of a small, angry and vocal minority. And I'd like to see that change. So no, I hope that you'll help us in that mission. I hope that everybody listening will continue to push on these conversations and to goddamn vote. I cannot stress how many activists I know who are not participating on a regular basis in their local elections. And that just feels silly to me, to spend a lot of time talking about these issues and pushing these things forward, and then to not put in that little step of going to your voting office. So we've gotten a little far flung for a sex show, but I do not regret taking a moment to tell people to fucking vote.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I just got a voter card in the mail.
Yeah,
there you go.
I have one more.
Congratulations, and thank you so much for touching base with us tonight.
One more thing real quick, if you guys can, before I go. How should I deal with people when I'm on the phone and stuff? Like when they're purposely misgendering me and like being rude? I don't know what to do with that.
Ask them straight up if they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a great way of just kind of cutting to the quick of it.
Yeah, that's and again, I made a joke earlier, Noah, about Ken Hovitt's fans misgendering you, and you know, I make that joke with some levity in that it doesn't surprise me, but I can also, I mean, obviously, it's hurtful. It's hurtful when people do that sort of thing. So I don't want to take away from the real harm that causes. But I agree with Nate and Christy. Like, ask them, hey, why are you doing this? What's up with this? See if it's malicious intent, or see if they're just like, some people, they don't even realize how harmful it is. Some people just see other people do it and they think that they can do it too, because the people that they like are doing it, you know, and having it opens up a conversation that they may not have the opportunity to have, right? Especially amongst their own circle of friends, which if they had people who identified from or who have transitioned or who have, you know, chosen different pronouns for themselves at some point in their life, they wouldn't be doing that shit to you. So maybe you can be that good influence on them in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks. I got to talk to Christy last week on the Discord, and that was awesome. And I'll keep in touch with you guys. Hopefully I can come on the show sometime as a volunteer. That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. Always looking for more folks to join the organization. Thanks for giving us a call.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day.
And Noah, there's this other great show. It's called Truth Wanted on the network. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yeah.
I recommend it. You know,
Dan,
but just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there.
Down boy. Just kidding. Truth Wanted's a great show, folks.
Yeah. Well, so let's get back into it, because we're talking about something that I know, Dan, was very like personal and real for me. And I've kind of teased it a little bit, but in particular, growing up here in the Texas Hill Country, as I know you and I both did, these ideas were just everywhere. You know, when I was doing research for this episode, the small city of Waco kept coming up over and over again, not just because of Baylor University, but also because of Magnolia, Chip and Joanna Gaines' bizarre monument to, I think, in a lot of ways, this kind of thinking. Tell me a little bit about some of the ideas that you saw growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in Waco, Texas. It used to be known as the town where a bunch of people were on a compound that got lit on fire by the ATF and the FBI in the 90s. And now it's known for reality home television shows to, you know, talk about buying, you know, antebellum houses and stuff. So that's a weird like shift in reputation that I have seen happen growing up in Waco, and it's very bizarre because
and yet it feels like a pretty straight line in some ways, though, doesn't it?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I can say this: Waco is, if you look at like you know, demographics maps of where the Bible Belt is, like Waco goes right through it, right? Like it's in the heart of Texas. It's the central Texas area, and obviously, if you know anything about David Koresh, like religion's kind of a big deal for a lot of people here, and so it doesn't surprise me that you read a lot of stories about gender complementarianism. Another church that's famous in the Waco area is the Antioch Church. And they were the church that Jimmy Seibert, which is the pastor there, like made a big sermon all against gay people when like gay marriage was legalized and stuff, that like got in the national news and stuff. I remember that happening. So that's very cool. But yeah, you know, when you have a lot of people who believe in a fundamentalist religion out there, obviously, again, these ideas about gender pop up. Like it's just part and parcel. So I experienced a lot of that growing up. I am a big dude. I am like 6'5", okay? And I was always a big dude. So there was a lot of expectations on me on how I should be living my life as a big dude that I never particularly felt comfortable with. I mean, I told this story on Truth Wanted last week, but I was a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout. So I did a lot of those kinds of activities. And that's also a Christian organization that has ideas about like manhood and like what the expectations are to be a man and stuff like that. And it's not that not all of those expectations are bad. Some of them I think are kind of good in some ways. Like, yeah, you should be confident in yourself. You should be someone in the community that people look up to. Okay, those are fine. But it's the prescriptive elements of this stuff that gets really kind of out of hand. So I experienced a lot of that kind of stuff growing up. And of course, I guess I'll talk about this now. When I was in high school, my girlfriend told me to read Wild at Heart, which Wild at Heart, of course, is this book that talks about these roles between men and women. I'll tell you this. I didn't really remember a whole lot about this book other than men are supposed to be this like warrior race and women are just supposed to be like, I don't know, the cheerleaders of the Warriors. Like that's kind of my
support staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was like
my,
yeah. That was my, I mean, that's really what they think. Like I believe they use the term like helper and stuff in these things. So it's very weird. It's very weird because I remember having that conversation with my girlfriend and saying like, I think a lot of this is kind of crap. And she being kind of shocked by this because that obviously wasn't a popular view where I was from. And so now, of course, living a little bit more of life, I realize even more that this is bullshit. Like I didn't go the other way. I wasn't like, oh, well, actually, looking at these roles, they actually do have some credit to them. Like it's just, you know, like I've learned to live my own life and be the person that I want to be and be happy in that. And I'm glad because had I followed a lot of these rules and expectations, I probably would have gotten myself into more unhealthy situations with people and unhealthy relationships that I don't think would have been good for me or my partner. And I think you see that happen in the news every day when we talk about these, again, domestic violence situations, but also situations from women, especially that feel like that they're trapped in these relationships and in these roles that they really don't want to be in. Again, like the negatives primarily happen with women, although men, of course, a lot of that comes from being a failure, these feelings of not living up to these expectations of what a man should be. You know, like that's also an equally important conversation to talk about and something that I definitely experienced in parts of my life. But it just kind of harms everybody. There's not a lot of good that comes out of it, honestly.
Yeah, fair to say. I mean, Nate, I'm very curious about your experience being a parent in a 2-male household. I mean, the roles and the expectations that go along with that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was weird for me growing up because my parents were very, very Christian, grew up very, very Pentecostal, but there was always a division of labor there. Like she taught her boys to cook. Her husband helped prepare meals. And so it was odd that there was that Pentecostal craziness. And then on the other hand, you had an absolute fair division of chores and of work. As far as raising kids, it's been pretty easy for me because I deconverted so very long ago. Like it's been 30 years nearly for me. My partner presents extremely gay, so he would definitely have the more expectation of the female role. But again, we don't really play to that. Like I do probably 90% of the cooking. He doesn't do bathrooms, right? So we just kind of we just divide it along what we're good at and what we want to do, and somehow it works out pretty well, and we've got a pretty healthy little family going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with finding your role. We do complement each other when we're in a partnership. And truth be told, I usually am the one that takes out the trash. My partner is usually the one that does the laundry. And so there are a lot of areas in our life where we do fall down those like specific lines. But Dan, you've been pointing out this whole time that the real danger here is when it becomes prescriptive, when it becomes like an obligation. And I wonder just how that shows up in daily life for y'all, even now. Even, you know, Nate, you said you've deconstructed these ideas a long time ago. I know that I've been actively working at it for a while myself, but I know it still pops up in my thinking, and I certainly hear it even in not explicitly like religious ways, not in ways that are necessarily tied to a deep and sophisticated theology. What do y'all see on a regular basis?
I mean, my partner has seen me cry way more times than I've seen my partner cry. Like, that's just as a fact. In fact, I can count on that. I really haven't seen her cry. It's like it's different. Like, and the only people that should care about that is us, right? Like, that's all that really matters, if that even matters, which it doesn't. and that's just kind of how I feel about this, right? It's like, okay, like, you know, you're telling a story about how you take out the trash, and I'm just hearing this like, okay, so what? You took out the trash. If you were living by yourself, that's something you would do anyway. Like, I don't know. It's like these kinds of things, sometimes basic human necessities we've kind of genderized in a way that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like, cooking is often established as a feminine thing, which is weird, because then we've got celebrities like Gordon Ramsay who are like yelling at people all the time, and like, you know, I don't know. It's just
if it's in a restaurant, or if it is in front of like a grill or a cook fire, then it's quote man's work.
Then if it's in a barbecue or whatever.
But the boring, like, menial stuff, that's for women.
It's like getting credit for something that you really didn't do. You know what I mean? It's like, I just kind of showed up here like this. I didn't really earn it. I don't know. Like, is that what it means to be a man? Is to like earn your place in the society? Is that why we have this nomenclature that says, oh, well, you're not a real man unless you do X, Y, and Z? Like, maybe that's part of it. Maybe the reason why men are having this higher power in our social strata is because of this performative sort of act that you have to do to earn it, and the subsequent hardships and harm that can come of it is kind of the payment. I mean, like, it's no secret that, for example, organized militaries, for as long as organized militaries have primarily been the roles of men, like, and especially in our. I mean, like, it wasn't even legal for women to serve in most places in the world, right? So it's like, why does that happen? Why does that exist? Again, it's part of this thing where you have to earn your stripes in order to like have this power. And obviously the whole system's fucking stupid, and I would just reject it outright. So whatever.
Yeah. And these things show up in the goofiest kinds of ways. Like, one thing I always like to point out is the trope of the doofy husband in like a bad sitcom situation. And I honestly think that trope exists, of the husband being sort of dumb and dull and slow, because when they try to depict that relationship in art, they want to be very careful to, you know, balance out the power. Because in reality, that man is the one who's calling the shots in nearly every scene, that's driving the plot along. That is the focus of everything. So we have to make him a little bit dumb so that people don't recognize that imbalance.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were going to be talking about Al Bundy tonight.
Yeah.
I still get most sitcoms that have ever existed. But yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
I see a lot of these sort of dying paradigms being relayed as sort of jokes. So, for example, like my grandmother, whenever we would have like family meals, and it would be we'd finish up, she'd be like, "Okay, ladies, into the kitchen," and literally the men would just get to sit there, fat and giggly, while the women went and cleaned up. Now she's since passed away, but still to this day, whenever we're finished and I cook a meal, because again, I usually do the cooking, and she'll say the same thing, but she's referring to my partner, who is a man, but it's a joke. And she'll be like, "Okay, ladies, into the kitchen." But there's an understanding now that it's not because she has a vagina, right? That's not the reason that they're going to share
We're
their
playing that
share of
role.
the workload. Right. It's because if one person does one thing, another person helps out, and we all share the load. Which, you know, humor can be a great source of levity for letting go of that kind of old shit.
Well, I think like a post-industrial society has also just changed the way that men and women like actually pragmatically function in our relationships as well. And because we've seen a more equalization of these roles, I mean, a woman like really it's obviously there's still struggles to be had in this area, but it is actually possible for a woman to make as much of a man, if not more so, in bringing home the bacon, as they say, than a man. And like that difference in powers now has also changed the way that we are organizing ourselves too, and having these conversations. It's no longer this obvious quote unquote biological function that people are pointing to, where it's like, oh well, of course these men are bigger and stronger, so they have to be the ones to do the hard manual labor to bring these down, when half of us are working office jobs and like, you know, aren't like are doing the same kind of work that anybody could do regardless of their situation.
Well, and what's amazing to me is people will point to the fact that, you know, women didn't used to exist in the workforce in a meaningful way, and how there was so much more leisure time and everything was so much more comfortable when a man could go out and work hard and bring that home to the family. And wouldn't it be great if we could make America great again by going back to that type of lifestyle? And, you know, it can feel tempting in a lot of ways. Not because I am like excited to work all the time and then come home to a roast and a martini, but because there's like a legitimate point to be made about how we are as a country all just working more. Like the average person is putting in more labor hours than we used to. And people want to blame that problem on women joining the workforce, when I don't think that's the most likely culprit here.
That makes zero sense. Zero sense. Like, no. And yeah, that's one thing that I was going to say too, is that a part of this is probably the fact that surviving on a single income in 2022 is next to impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's just no way. Everybody's got to contribute. So these sort of old ideas just have to die. The sooner the better.
You're really speaking to me right now, Nate. You really are. I gotta say.
I mean, I think monogamy might be on the way out if inflation continues the way that it is.
Oh my God, you're so right. That's so true. I was just going to point out that also men just feel emasculated if a woman is accomplishing more in a role that's supposed to be traditionally what a man should be able to accomplish. Like, for example, my partner, who is a woman, makes more than me. And like, you tell that to some people and they just think, oh, well, your man's a joke. You know, what's your man doing?
Right.
In this thing. And I'm just here like, it's fucking awesome, dude. It's great. Like, I'm not complaining. I'm having a good time over here. You're the guys that are mad about it. I don't know. I think there are some dudes who would like have a problem with that if their partner would make more than them, because what does that mean? It means that sometimes we make decisions about, you know, financial related things, and she has more saying power, and that's uncomfortable for some dudes to handle, because that's not what they are told that they should be expecting. So, you know, like, get over it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
this is the world now.
Is there reason to believe that these ideas might be dying out? I mean, we know so much about how the natural world doesn't reflect this like complementary male-female dichotomy. I mean, we look at the mating habits of everything from like bees to bonobos, and we look at chromosomal diversity and sexual orientation. And like, we've learned so much about these topics, and yet we're still holding on to these beliefs. And there's maybe even like a loud, I don't know, death rattle for them, or maybe a rejuvenation. I mean, what do y'all predict?
I think the death rattle thing's accurate. I was just saying earlier, like, I grew up in a very, very Christian family, but there was still a fair division of labor, and I learned to cook because I wanted to, and I wasn't ever like told that, you know, that's women's work. You shouldn't want to do this. You should want to go chop wood or fucking barbecue, or I don't know what. But Dan, what did you want to say?
Well, nothing more than like, there is a shift in like what people consider important in like the social side of politics that happens every half decade or so. And like right now in current media is trans people are just being talked about a lot, specifically trans women being in spaces where women are feeling like, oh, these are actually men in disguises taking over, traditional women's spaces. Like that's kind of the rhetoric that you're seeing, and it's almost like this, like I don't know, it's this recognition that these roles are real in a way, because if you're acknowledging gendered people in spaces, and that there's a difference in power dynamics and stuff, then like you have to also come to the conclusion that like women have not had it good for like a lot of it, which is like this weird thing that like people can simultaneously acknowledge and yet still be bigoted towards, which is just like really fascinating to see. That's what we're seeing right now, I think.
Well, I know for myself, these ideas took a long time to deconstruct and still are being deconstructed. I still find myself sort of having these types of thoughts pop up in some very weird ways, or just having assumptions that I maybe haven't challenged yet. Are there things that come to mind for y'all where folks should be maybe curious about themselves? I mean, if we want to be introspective and really deconstruct this, what do y'all see coming up?
Nate, you go first. Not it.
One, two, three, not it.
For those who can hear the audio podcast.
What did you ask again?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't mean to stump y'all. I guess the question is just, when people start to think about these ideas, they notice that they're everywhere, or certainly that's been my experience. And I think it takes a long time to root all of this out. I mean, it's just microplastic in the water that we're all swimming in. These assumptions about like men are like this and women are like this, and all of that type of like 90s bullshit stand-up comedy is just still everywhere. And I wonder if there's any advice that y'all have for encouraging people to just notice it, or to begin to break those things down.
I think it's important to actually talk about it when you notice it, and actually vocalize it, and make sure that the other people around you realize that you're catching this, and that now we know that this isn't correct. And yeah, maybe we can get a laugh out of it, but really it's just not that funny.
Yeah. I mean, I could say, looking at statistics from the past 100 years and seeing how the development of, I don't know, economic stability for single women has a direct correlation with how much power women are now having in society. Like, starting with really a material analysis is what is most interesting to me, and what I think people should look at if they want to talk about, just the fact of the matter. Like, what happens when you give people who have traditionally had to make amends on their own dreams and ideas for themselves in order to become homemakers, right? Because that's what their society and their family has told them to do. What happens when you give them that freedom to make choices for themselves, to make career decisions, to make choices that are not going to reflect those traditional values? You come into seeing what we're starting to see in America, which is people having that freedom and expressing it in ways that might be unexpected or nuanced. So if you want to see more of a difference, give people more money. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm reminded of a story that a thing that happened to me there about confronting these bad ideas when they come up, because somebody said when Elliot Page came out as trans I think it was a year or two ago, and they said, oh, she's just doing it for attention. I'm like, why would anybody do that for attention? Like, I'm going to pretend that you didn't say that. And we got into a little bit of a story about how we're all stronger and we're all better off when we can chase our dreams, when we can be the most productive at what we're good at. Like, think about how many brilliant female scientists or female leaders that we've missed out on over the generations because of this bullshit. Like, there's so many of them out there. I gave the example of Alan Turing, right? Like, a brilliant man cracks the Enigma code, invents the computer, kills himself because he was criminalized for being gay. Like, think what he might have done had he lived another 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And think how much more productive the rest of us might be if we were happy. We were allowed to do what we want to fucking do.
Yeah, or for the MRA, the men's rights activists in the audience who are just very skeptical about, you know, the goals of feminism and what it seeks to accomplish. Yeah, look at why are there more men that commit to rates of suicide in our country and in other countries more so than women? Why does that happen? Is there a reason for this? And it can also be because of these gender expectations and gender roles. I guarantee you hear about the stories of people who are most depressed in their lives, and it's because they feel like that they are failures, because they don't have they're not setting up to these expectations. Again, that this is
measuring themselves with the wrong measuring stick in a lot of ways.
Measuring themselves with the wrong measuring sticks. Exactly. Like, this is a very common sentiment that happens amongst men. This kind of performance anxiety that is set upon these expectations that are just rules that people made up. You know?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of my own story in that because I very much grew up around these types of ideas and had a pretty narrowly defined notion of what a man was supposed to be. And I sure as shit am just not that guy. Yeah. And so there was a real relief in recognizing that, like, oh, I'm not a shitty man. I'm just, like, not really a man. Not in that like strict, narrowly defined kind of way.
Mm-hmm. I'm just a dude. I'm like the fucking what do you call it? The welcome to Good Burger song. You know, I'm a dude. We're all dudes. Like, that's
we're
how
just all dudes.
I love that song,
dude. Isn't it great? I'm just like, I'm just here. I don't have to. I'm very anarchist about this, right? It's like I am going to continue being who I am, and that just happens to fall into sometimes what a man is, and sometimes not. But it's just I exist, and I am, therefore I am. I don't know what else you want me to say about it, you know?
No, I mean, for me, it really did take a while, and a big part of deconstructing was through film. You know, just being able to kind of inhabit the eyes of somebody else for a couple of hours, and to see different ways of being a man, different ways of being a person depicted.
Yeah.
What kinds of things have been useful for y'all? I mean, has it been a particular movie or a book? Is there a particular idea that was useful in helping you to start to see this in daily life?
For me, cooking shows. This is going to sound dumb, but cooking shows, and seeing that men could be successful cooks, chefs, business owners, and also so could women. Another thing that helped me was in my experience in the Army with a female officer in the infantry. When I was in basic training, there was, I think, 6 women out of 84 candidates, and two of those women, like, I mean, half the people quit anyway, but 2 of those women, they were some hard fucking soldiers, man. One of them went on to sniper school. She did the battle fitness test with a fractured tibia. She was tough as nails. Like, and that really was an experience for me to be like, wow, like, that is one badass soldier. So yeah, there's a couple for me.
That's interesting. I'm glad you say that, Nate, because if you ask the typical man, what's the top 10 most inspiring people to you, 9 times out of 10 that entire list is going to be men.
Sure.
And I think, like, as men, we should be okay to be like, oh, I like this woman. I want to be more like her because I like the qualities that this person has. I mean, like, if you want to talk about good male role models, for me, I fucking love Mr. Rogers. Dude, I think Mr. Rogers is like the man. I think, like, if more dudes were like Mr. Rogers, the world would be a better place. Like, that's just, you know, besides his secret anti-gay sentiments aside, you know, like the at least what he presented on TV as his persona, like that's what I think is real good forms of I don't know, masculinity, if you want to call it that. Or I just think it is personhood, but you know, like he was a dude, so we can talk about that. But I can say for myself, for most of my working career, more often than not, my bosses have been women more than men, and I've really liked most of the women that I've worked for. Like I enjoyed their presence. I think that they have great leadership qualities, and I knew that they could do lots of shit that I couldn't do because of their training and because of their dedication to their work. So I really like those women in my life, and I think I don't know, it's weird sometimes, like when you don't hear men talking about the women that they respect. It's always like a lot of dudes, which I guess makes sense. You want, you know, people who have that gender experience you're going to relate to a little bit more, right? But like, I don't know, like Albert Einstein lived in a whole fucking other time period compared to me. Like I could say he's a cool guy, but like all we have in common is that we're both dudes. Like he studied physics way more. I like talk on Thursday night call-in shows. We're very different otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many bizarre pieces to all of this, and it lands in so many weird ways. I working in mental health, the vast majority of my coworkers for the past 7-8 years have been women. And yet, you know, I had an experience not that long ago where I was sitting in a conference room. I was the only man in the place. There were 20 people there. I was not particularly well dressed. I wasn't near the head of the table. And there was a woman, our boss, standing up, addressing everybody. And yet when somebody from an outside group came in looking to ask a question to the leader, took a beeline directly for me. And I think that men need to go out of their way to recognize that that happens.
Yeah.
That the reason why their idols are typically men is because that's who's on TV. That's who is in the history books. And to actively work against that, it's not changing history. It's recalibrating things to actually show a more accurate depiction of the world.
Very true.
Absolutely. And Boudica's a thing too. I love that story. The warrior queen of the Iceni. Oh, one of the great women. For if you don't know who she is, folks, look up that story. It is an amazing story of a strong-willed woman.
Nate, you're just too cultured for me sometimes. You
talk about
French cities and like I just don't know. You know,
I'm just a history nerd. Also, a woman killed Cyrus the Great. Moving on.
That's cool.
Well, Nate, before you wrap us up for the night, was there anything else in this space that stands out as I guess a problem that people aren't noticing? Because that to me is the scariest part of all of this, is how insidious it is.
I think people are noticing. I think that it's really you're only going to find this kind of backwards shit in Christian fundamentalism. Like I don't think you're really going to find that anywhere else, because that's where it comes from. If you don't have that, okay, well, like I said, with the exception of other religions, but really it's religion. It's telling you what to do, right?
Not based in math and science.
Yeah, like don't tell me how to live my life. And when you get into that sort of like Dan's been harping on about for an hour now, it's like, don't give me the prescription for how to live my life. I'll figure it out on my own. Thanks very much.
Yeah, man. I don't like when the man tells me what to do.
You were really channeling the Less Than Jake tonight, huh?
I don't know what's up, but
the Good Burger.
It's just the vibe. It's the vibe I have right now. So
I guess. Yeah, I think we can leave it there for now. Nate, what do you got for us?
Well, I have got a great link for the rest of the ACA's content. AEN Podcast, tiny.cc/AEN Podcast. If you're liking what you hear tonight, this banter, this fun, jovial conversation with this crazy Dan guy, he's got his own show. He's got his own show. It's on tomorrow. It's called Truth Wanted. It's a call-in show. We've got our Sunday shows, Talk Heathen, the Nonprofits, and the Atheist Experience. So yeah, if you want to check it out, everything's there on that one spot. Also, folks, if you want to continue the conversation, you can do so on the Facebooks at the Secular Sexuality fan groups, run for fans by fans, tiny.cc/FBSSG. Also, we have merch. This month, we have an extra special shirt. It's been a long time coming. I don't know if you can see that there, but it says, "Give yourself a big old orgasm," or better yet, give somebody else one. We finally got it on a shirt, folks. So go over to tiny.cc/merch ACA. It's available for a limited time. So be sure to get yourself one before supplies run out. And before we go out, I would like to throw up the people who make this show all possible. They work behind the scenes. They run our sound. They take our notes. It's the crew. Hello, crew. Y'all are looking beautiful. Thank you very much for everything that you do. Oh, did you see that Truth Wanted shirt, Dan?
I know. I was trying not to comment on it. I feel a little betrayed.
Baby, we're everywhere. Deal with it.
We're everywhere. Deal with it. Well, I'll tell you what. I appreciate y'all getting into this with me. Dan, super. It took way too long to have you back on, so really appreciate you being here. Nate, really thankful to have you back in the rotation, and had a great time with both of y'all tonight. And I guess I just want to encourage everybody listening to put on your high heels, take out the trash, make a nice dinner, and then give yourself a big old orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.